Square Ball Podcast.
Welcome to the show where we get Phil Hayes' view from the press box. Dan here from the Square Ball along with Michael Normanton as well. Show is powered by West Yorkshire Electrical, isn't it, Michael Normanton?
Yep. So is my car. Drove in that today. That's electric, powered by a charge that they put in.
Because they specialise in renewables.
Wait a minute. Since when has your car been electric?
My wife got it through work.
And
I'm driving it.
Last time I saw you driving, it was a 02 Renault Clio, which I was going to confidently say was not electrically charged.
No, it was an 09 Fiesta more recently, which I do still have.
Even better.
But,
So when it came to the installation of the EV charging port, you got solar panels?
Yep. They rode in. They bought the house. They were there.
Right. What about battery storage?
I don't have it yet. They do it, though. I know where to go if I do want it.
Yeah, and how well do you think they'll put it in? Dead good?
Really well.
Excellent.
Connect it all up proper.
They do loads of electrical work. Anything with wires in they'll work with, basically. LED lighting, security alarms, school contracting, fire alarms. For home and business, finance available for work on your home and your business. wyelectrical.co.uk for details. Or search West Yorkshire Electrical on your socials.
You gave us a very short verdict on Tuesday night before we started recording. Phil, in a more professional way, how do you want to say that?
Yes. Can I use the Malice in Sunderland joke yet again? It wasn't a night for the tourist board, really, was it? And
Didn't you just say, well, that was wank?
yes, and slightly more extreme than that as well. It just wasn't good, was it? It was pretty much as you predicted, that it might be another bit of a Tuesday night like Stoke and Rotherham, albeit against a better team, I think it has to be said. Not a massively impressive team, but I'll be honest, I sat and listened to Farke afterwards, and he said, they were part of the bus, they were very defensive, they were this, that and the other.
They were effective though, weren't they? That was the thing, they were effective.
I thought they deserved to win. I thought they had the better chances. We were sat, the press box is miles from the pitch, it's right at the back of the stand, so my thighs are still recovering from the climb. But we were sitting with about 25 minutes to go and saying, I think Sunderland are going to nick this. It just had that feel about it. It was a really soft goal, but if you go back through the game and look at the chances that there were, the better ones were for them, particularly that Meslier save, which was an absolute blinder, kept it at 0-0. But I don't know, I can totally understand why Farke went with what was essentially unchanged lineup. I know he had to put Spence in at left back because Byram wasn't fit. But the way the form had been going, the way the results were, it kind of made sense not to make too many changes. And he might have been stung as well by the alterations at Stoke that really didn't work.
It was brought up on our post-match ball stream, and that was exactly the answer or the conclusion I came to anyway, was he was probably averse to making changes because of what had happened there. Yeah. And I think he would have probably been criticised in the run-up to the game had he done so. But
as it was, it just didn't seem like there was a lot of spark in the team. I don't know if they were a bit leggy, I don't know if it was football catching up with them slightly, but I kind of tweeted it midway through the second half saying this is like one of those nights where it just looks like everybody realises that they've actually played quite a lot of football and they can feel it in their legs, and the imagination and the magic isn't there. And they didn't, I don't think they looked like winning that on Tuesday. They could have had a point out of it, but in what was pretty cold, wet, flat night overall, I thought Sunderland were worth it.
Can I just ask you then, because this is about the view from the press box and the sort of sense that you get in the press conferences afterwards as well, because the lateness of the changes was brought up, wasn't it, in the press conference? And what did Daniel Farke say to that? Because if there's one thing I've noticed that seems to be a bit of a trend with him, he won't make a change until at least the 70th minute on all occasions.
He doesn't rush into them, does he? And I've written about this, actually. What happens when Leeds are chasing a game is a bit weird and a bit mad. They end up with 3 forwards and 3 wingers on the pitch. It's kind of like a front line of 6. Throw the kitchen sink. And I think I've found myself, it worked down at Norwich, you have to say that. At Stoke, they paid for the fact that Bamford missed that penalty, and I think if he scores that penalty they win the game, and you come out of a difficult match thinking happy with that. Rotherham, there was a bit of creativity there. Anthony had that late goal disallowed, should have had a penalty. The disallowed goal was the right decision, but it was extremely marginal, so they might have got away with that one. It didn't work at all at Sunderland. I was having a look through, and none of the substitutes who came on had the shot on goal. None of them created any chances. It didn't feel and doesn't feel that strategic, which is kind of strange because Farke in a lot of ways is strategic. His plan is very kind of not rigid, but it's very defined, the way that Leeds play, the way that they set up, what they do, the patterns of the football. But in those points where they need an equaliser or they need a winner, it's all a bit kind of gung-ho, and it's all a bit sort of fire everybody on the pitch and hope that something pays off. And I think to look back at the closing stages against Sunderland, they did what they had to do, which was basically pack the middle of the pitch, make sure they had bodies behind the ball, and leave Leeds with a lot of players up front, but nobody really in a position to do much apart from that Pirro chance that was cleared off the line. But that was the only real threat. Farke was asked about it afterwards. He said, when I made the changes, we conceded. So, you could say that the changes didn't work in that sense. But I don't think that's really the point. I think it probably did need a little bit of a freshen up, and I think it would have helped had that come slightly earlier. One thing I have noticed as well with him is that he doesn't rush to change the midfield area, the centre of midfield. He'll do it when Leeds need a goal. Then you switch to a back three. Ampadu gets left to kind of man the fort in loads of space. Is Michael can you back?
Apologies, everyone.
Impending death to my right at the moment.
Need to stuff the cigars.
But yeah, anyway, back to the midfield. So that's what happens when they're chasing the game. It's three at the back, usually Archie Gray on the right, and Ampadu, there's all this space, you marshal it. And I think the idea is that the opposition are going to go ultra defensive, so you're not too much at risk of in the gaps that are left. But here's the thing. They're doing a lot of things well this season. They've been good this season, Leeds. And I think Tuesday night was an example of how this season could quite easily become very frustrating, in that prior to that game, I think it was 28 points from 33, 9 wins from 11, which is about as good a run of form as you could possibly ask for. And then they finished that round of games 10 points back from the top two. And it kind of automatically generates, I guess, minute criticism of things that don't go right and things that go wrong. But in the grand scheme, they're just suffering from, a kind of freak performance from the top two at the moment, which is just, to this point, is just not giving way.
Yeah, it is a very freakish season, isn't it? I mean, like, you look at the teams that went up last year. I think as Moscow put in his match report that's on the Square Ball website, like, I think the top two teams lost 8-10 games over the course of the season. We're probably on course for about that-ish or thereabouts, which would be a fairly typical season. But we've got these two outliers above us that are just skewing everything. But another thing to say from that is that, as disappointing as it was midweek with it was Leicester beat Millwall, Ipswich beating Watford away with a late one, that it's not over. There's still a long way to go.
No, definitely not.
It's difficult not to come out of that round of matches and feel quite despondent, but there is a long way to go. We've got Ipswich at home in a couple of weeks, which is obviously now looking like a must-win. And then there's the whole Leicester-Ipswich playing each other twice in 3 or 4 weeks thing going on in December and January. They can't both win, so there's an opportunity to claw points back on one or both of them. And it is going to be a long road to chipping away at that points total, and we managed it a little bit because there was that point when we faced Leicester, I think, as you said on one of the shows this week, Michael, when we could have been 17, 18 points
17
adrift.
It would have been, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not over. It's just a case of it being a bit of a setback.
But what you said about being despondent is the contradiction of it all, isn't it? That you are, the points tally versus the games played is really good. And Leeds have been impressive for a lot of this season. What Farke has done with them tactically has worked far more often than it hasn't. He's built a good team. The signings and the recruitment has been really decent. But on a night like Tuesday, you feel this frustration generating about, things that have gone wrong, things that haven't worked. But the frustration isn't really with what Leeds are doing badly, if that makes sense, because Leeds aren't doing a lot badly. It's with the fact that this has been pretty good from Leeds. In fact, better than pretty good to this point. And the table somehow looks how it looks. And I'm sure Farke feels like that as well. And I do sort of wonder at what stage it becomes a little bit soul-destroying when you're trying to chase that. In that as I say, nine wins from 11. And there you are, 10 points back, even though you feel like you've basically been informed since the end of September and have dropped very few points in a division where you are going to lose games. This is the problem, is that in order for Leeds to kind of stick in here and to stay in contention, you're looking for them and asking them to win every match, which is just not feasible, not possible.
As we've said before, it's the draws that kill you in this division, isn't it, when you're trying to get promoted?
Well, Coventry next are a good example of that. They're drawing a lot of games. So it seems to me that without having followed Mark Robins' press conferences religiously, he will, if he's not there already, will soon be at the point of saying, if we can convert draws into wins, then, you know, Bob's your uncle. And they, you know, they do fall into that category. Leeds haven't drawn a lot of games. Nobody at the top end has drawn a huge number of games, and particularly not the top two.
We'll come on to Coventry in a few moments. I just want to ask you, I came up with a bit of a theory, and I just wondered if you could kind of explore this one with me, that the style of football that Farke is employing and deploying at times, when you read like the reaction on like Twitter, forums and stuff like that, there's a bit of kind of chuck the baby out with the bathwater tends to come into play, and people are saying the style of football is not intense enough, it's not quick enough. You know, there's times when this knocking it round at the back and just probing for openings is just ineffective and it doesn't work. I wonder, do you think that style of football, and almost the sort of playing in second and third gear for a lot of the game, it's intended to leave running in the legs for the second half of the season? Because this is a long season, as Farke keeps reminding us, and I do wonder if the slightly lower intensity style of football is in order to preserve these players for the spring, when all this stuff becomes really, really pertinent for the run-in, and you see things can start to get erratic, can't you, for some teams in the second half of the season? And it feels like he just wants to stay on a steady, narrow course almost. Well,
one of the things you can say is that to this point they haven't had many injuries, or they haven't had an overwhelming number. They have been without players from time to time, but Farke said it himself. You know, they basically came into December with Stuart Dallas as the only absentee. And okay, since then you've had Byram and others, but that's certainly quite unusual at Leeds, going back over several years. You know, injuries have been a massive problem for them for quite a while, and that has definitely changed. But even if that's in mind for Farke, his style is his style. I mean, I would point you to Leicester when it comes to the way teams play, and the way in which some teams are patient, the way in which some teams might have you wanting a bit more intensity. Leicester are not, you know, all-out gung-ho team at all. They will have masses and masses of possession. Have a look at the numbers from their win over Millwall last night, particularly in the early stages of the game, where they had all of the ball, very few chances, but, you know, again, just had that edge and that extra percentage that meant that they won that pretty comfortably in the end, and deservedly. Leicester are not going at everybody hammer and tongs. They can be quite conservative. They can be very, very patient with the ball at the back. I don't think it particularly matters. And I have a feeling that were this to be a typical season and the division to look as it normally does, you wouldn't be getting much conversation like this, because Leeds have not lost many games and have not dropped that many points comparatively. But it feels and it looks a little bit like they have, because somehow they are still so far behind. And every time people talk about Ipswich are going to drop off, Ipswich don't.
When you look at the disappointing results this year as well, we've not been far away in any of them. Southampton got away from us early on, but every other game we'd been right in it until the end. If you think of the Birmingham defeat, that was obviously a very late penalty. Stoke, Sunderland, Rotherham, I know that we could have won that. It feels like we've been very close to getting points in all of the games that we've actually found disappointing. So you can see the merit in the style, I suppose, even if sometimes it hasn't, you know, resulted in a win.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it on this week's weekly show as well, about whether maybe are we a little bit addicted to thrilling drama and steering away from normality. And I say that with reference to like the Bielsa era, that I think there's still a little bit, or there was particularly early season before we went on the sort of winning run, that sort of clamour for the all-action style, because the memory has kind of distilled it into a beautiful, wonderful memory now, and you kind of forget the anxious games that we had, or the games where we had 15 chances and all the possession and all the attacking, but still only either 1-0 or it got away from us, whatever. Because we did have those games under Bielsa as well, didn't we? But I wonder if it's kind of influencing the current day mindset of the fans.
I don't know. I'd be surprised if it is. I think what's influencing the mindset is that we've gone from the summer where it wasn't quite clear what Leeds would do, because so little was in order at the end of last season after relegation, that you couldn't say with any certainty at that point. I think you knew there was going to have to be a takeover, because there was, certainly the way I saw it, there was no alternative for Radrizzani. But when and how quickly was always the question. You couldn't be certain about who would be head coach. You couldn't be certain about which players were going to stay, who they were going to be able to recruit. So you didn't really know what was coming this season. And I think it's probably been as good as it could have been, all things considered, to this stage anyway. But then you get into the season, you have a kind of mixed first month. But then the team start to look really good, and so do the results. So you realise that actually, yeah, they should be in the mix for the top 6, definitely. And then the results start to get better again. And there's that part you're thinking, automatic promotion is potentially there and again is possible. And I don't imagine there's a club in the country who are more afraid of the playoffs or have more paranoia about the playoffs than Leeds. So we're sat here with a really good team, really high performing team who are not perfect and do have the flaws and imperfections. They're not the best of the best, but they can be on the day, and certainly in this season in this league, who are going nicely, but are at risk. As I think we discussed this on Monday, that because of the position Leeds are in and because of the lead that the top two have, it doesn't really give Leeds any breathing space to have the kind of patch of poor form that is almost unavoidable at some stage of the season. If Leeds now were to go through a run of 4, 5, 6 games where they don't pick up much and they lose too many of them, don't gather enough points, then they might well be out of the running for the top 2, despite the fact that they have been this good. And I think that's what's doing it, isn't it? It's the realisation that it is a freak this season, and it is unfortunate given how good Leeds have been. And it begs the question, are they actually going up? For all that they've had good results and played well, is this going to end in promotion? And I think it's the fear of that not happening that makes people, twitchy.
I was thinking about this in relation potentially to next season. If we do fail in the playoffs, we could potentially have a worse team and play worse next season and still go up, because it looks like it'll probably be a weaker division next season because
it's a
the
very
team's
good
coming
point,
down.
yeah.
So we could be that we're worse on basically every statistic next year and win the title.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the potential for that to happen is definitely there. But I think if you're sensible as well, you would know that this can't be a 2-year project in the sense of the squad exactly as it is now being there again next season. Farke is obviously on a long contract. I think you could definitely go into a second season with him, but you would have to sell players for P&S. You'd have to mix things up. It would have to change. I mean, we're a long way from that at the moment.
But that's the dread that looms, though, isn't it, Phil? I think that's what I'm saying. It's informing the thinking.
Yeah, no, it is. So I don't feel like it hasn't been entertaining this season. You're talking about the style of football and what we've been watching. I don't feel as if we've been sitting half asleep. Quite the opposite, really. I think it's been really good to follow. But it's not quite satisfying enough because of how it's shaping up in the table, would be my observation.
With regards to the table, though, I messaged you. Yes, we have continued a WhatsApp relationship, even though we knocked the 20 minutes on the head now. Now you've done it once.
After Saturday's roaring success, we thought, right, call it a day.
Yeah, it's all done now. But I did message you and just say, when you look at the games we've played, though, out of the top 7, obviously we can't play ourselves, but we've played Leicester, Ipswich, Southampton, Sunderland and Hull all away. We will have played West Brom away by the end of Christmas. So that leaves all home games against those sides in the running. So the home form is significant, is the point I'm making. Yeah,
I was going to say what's significant about that is that if you're therefore saying that the games so far have been easier at home, as in the opposition, which you'd have to say based on the table they have been, Leeds have absolutely made the most of them. 7 wins on the bounce. So it's they've kind of put the yards in there, which means that the more critical games, what you might call 6-pointers further down the line, are going to be there to be had because they are going along nicely at Ellen Road, and Coventry kind of falls into that category as well. A game they have to win. A game I think they'll feel very confident of winning, and I think Farke will just want to see kind of normal service resume on Saturday. But I think it will be interesting this time round. And I did ask him this; he didn't really commit one way or the other, whether he feels like he needs to freshen it up a bit more for this game. Because I did think it was a bit leggy on Tuesday night. It didn't feel as fresh and as sharp. And if I'm being totally honest, I thought the best player on the pitch was probably Jack Clarke. For them, I would say I thought Sunderland deserved to win.
Yeah, he looks like a good player, doesn't he? He's maturing into a really good player.
Yeah, he looks like he's trained on, and it's funny with Clarke because Leeds did think that they got the best end of that deal when they sold him to Spurs, and it's hard to argue with that actually because the money came in the summer they got promoted. It was used to make that happen. So all round, I think everybody was happy. He didn't look like he was. Didn't do much at Spurs, so it was just kind of jumping from loan to loan. But if and when Sunderland sell him, I think they'll get far more than the 10 million or 9.4 million that Leeds did for him when they sold him to Tottenham. He's definitely improved. He's matured. He's learned how to drop, how to be very difficult to track. And it was a kind of key battle because with him and Archie Gray, because it was kind of Clark's impetus on the left that got Sunderland out of a fairly kind of lacklustre start. They weren't great to begin with, but once he got going, it definitely woke them up. And you could tell that he had that edge of pace on Gray that was going to cause him a problem. Hence the booking early on.
Yeah, there's very little in the way of action for our front four. Rutter in particular was quiet, wasn't he?
Yeah. And I say in the end, you have basically 6 attacking players on the pitch, and the 4 that have come off the bench don't have a shot on goal between them. So it just didn't work in that period. But you do have nights like that.
I think you should ask Farke about playing Pirro at 9 again. Try and upset him.
Yeah, why not? Well, I mean, I do think that aside from left back, that's probably the one position where you're wondering what is the solution there if the kind of Pirro-Rutter axis is not working. Somerville moved central once Farke started making the changes, but Somerville's been kind of running riot from wide positions, hasn't he? And I think yet to show that he can control the game from the middle of the pitch, and actually you feel a little bit like you might waste the best of him there. And I guess one of the things about the way in which Leeds switched to the back 3 and all out, everybody chuck the kitchen sink in the closing stages of those games when it's like that, is that Farke doesn't look like he's necessarily got solutions within his 4-2-3-1 or whatever you want to call it. How that normally what it is. It doesn't look like within that structure it's able to be one change here, one change there to completely revolutionise everything or to pick Leeds up.
It feels like we can change personnel but not necessarily change shape a lot of the time.
Well, he does change shape, but I think that is probably the one position.
Or effectively change shape, maybe.
Yeah, but I guess for him it would be quite nice if you could change it without having to change shape. That your structure continues to work, but you get somebody else on the pitch who makes a difference. I think in certain positions, like for example, you've got Nonto out wide if it isn't going well for James. You've got Anthony if it isn't going well for Somerville, vice versa. At 10, who's the alternative there? Who makes it happen there if the Pirro-Rutter combination isn't working?
Yeah, especially as they like to do that little quick interchange of passes on the edge of the D, don't they? Back to goal, lay it off, and if there's somebody not quite capable of unlocking that, or maybe, just drifting out of that space if it's getting congested like it was against Sunderland. But
I do realise that we're picking at bones here, because the results have been really good. And a lot of the attacking players have scored goals, have had a lot of assists. There isn't that much coming in terms of threat, I think, from further back, fullbacks and midfielders in terms of goals from them. But they've been a good team of Leeds. That's a fact.
What have you made of Ampadu in recent weeks? Because it feels like he has dropped off from his early form.
Well, when I was talking about them freshening up for the weekend, I was having a look at the clutch players who've played a lot of minutes under Farke, and there is this, certain group that have been always there. And Ampadu's played every minute. Ampadu's been right in the thick of this. Has also had a lot of games for Wales. I think that shows you that he's the midfielder, the centre mid that Farke trusts most. And I think that also applies when they do switch to 3 at the back and go looking for an equaliser or a late winner, that it's Ampadu who's basically asked to cover that massive swathe of space in the middle rather than anybody else. You would assume, some players do play 46 games, some players get right the way through the season. You would assume at some point there might have to be a bit of a switch up there. And I think, he does have a squad, Farke. This is probably the sort of weekend where you have to think about using it.
Particularly with one eye on Ipswich the week after, maybe you think, is this where I give these lads a chance just to recuperate a little bit and then be fresh for the weekend after?
But I think probably more about Coventry, actually, because it's off the back of Sunderland, where it did look, just a little bit flat and not a lot of inspiration there. Perhaps for this game specifically, you've got a week before Ipswich, so you've got time to recuperate in that. But for this game that they have to win, I think a bit of tactical switching might be for the best. But in terms of personnel rather than the system itself.
Well, to Coventry then, and they drew 1-1 with Southampton on Wednesday night, off the back of a little spell of wins, which followed a spell of defeats, which followed a spell of draws. They've kind of gone in 3 almost identifiable stages across the course of the season, and they were the 14th in the table.
It's very mid-table.
I was going to say, that I've put on the notes, actually, the very example of middle-of-the-road championship side at the minute. Interesting that Ipswich have got Norwich in the early kick-off on Saturday, so that could potentially add a little bit of pressure to things at Ellen Road, depending on what happens there.
Could. Yeah.
I mean, they don't like each other, do they?
No.
Do they struggle in the same way we have traditionally struggled in Yorkshire derbies against worse teams?
Do they call this the Old Farm Derby?
No, I think somebody coined that, yeah.
Yeah, it's good, that.
Ho and indeed ho.
Yeah, so there's that. We've obviously got Coventry. I'm just looking down the fixtures. As I mentioned in one of the shows before, we've got Birmingham Leicester, which is all the way on Monday night. So there's a bit of there's going to be a delayed reaction to that one, isn't it? We're not going to sort of know properly until probably after we record again exactly what things are shaping up like with regards to the top end of the table. Yeah, fascinating weekend. It feels like an opportunity maybe to reset, lay down a marker again, and just reassure everybody that we're all right.
It's the last normal weekend as well, isn't it? Before you get into that burst of Christmas games where it feels like you don't really sleep and it's just game after game, after meal after meal, after drink after drink.
I mean, the daft thing with the table as well is that because it's the middle of December, there's a lot, you're running through the fixtures there. There's a lot of crossing the fingers to do for many, 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 many weeks, really, isn't there?
It's as Farke keeps saying, though, isn't it? You don't really have to look at the table and we'll look, 6 or 7 games from the end. We'll look at it then.
Do you reckon we can go without speaking about the table until game 40? Should we try?
Easy.
Yeah.
It was easier in the days where you could not look until 6 games from the end and go, oh, we're 15th. Whereas when you're at the top, you can't help but look at it, can you?
Tell you what, think about Coventry. My memories of Coventry. I've got the 1987 FA Cup semi-final at Hillsborough. I think that might be the first time I cried at a football match. That. Sad
I can
day.
understand why. Yeah,
that was a sad day. And then we got obviously beating them in the 1992 run into the title, which was, I think it was after Forest had just beaten Man United unexpectedly. And I remember sitting in the car park on would be the southeast corner, that car park over towards where McDonald's is now, and listening to Forest beating Man United on the radio. And then walking over to Ellen Road for it was a tea time kickoff against Coventry. We were, like in the days before Sky kind of moved everything around for everybody. We were on ITV following their 3 o'clock kickoff. We were on like the evening kickoff against Coventry, and it was so nervous that night. I remember was it 2-0? We won in the end. I think Chris Fairclough scored there. But,
you may be right.
Yeah, that was a nice season.
So I remember Darren Huckabee tearing us apart for Coventry and thinking, God, I'd love to sign him.
Yeah,
and then we did.
Peter and Love as well. Just speaking of Coventry pace merchants, he was always exciting and exotic, wasn't he? Who sort of one of the first African imports into the Premier League.
I feel like I haven't written about Coventry much. That we can't have played that much over the years. The 2 things that jump out are one, the banner asking for Blackwell to be sacked in that 06-07 season after they lost down there, and then the second one, everybody having a go at Redfern after he substituted Ross McCormack towards the end of the game when he was caretaker. But that aside, unless I'm missing something very, very striking, it doesn't bring out many memories, Coventry, in the way that some clubs. I mean, I feel like I've been to Millwall 100 times. Stories about Millwall till the end of time, but not so much Coventry.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Yeah, I do carry a fairly prominent footballing scar from that 87 Cup final. It really, I don't know, just something to do with my age or whatever, or it's probably one of the earliest memories I've got now of a football match. Carry that with me for years, but they've actually caused us very little offence across the years since, have they, Coventry?
Yeah. How's propaganda going with them? Anything?
Never had to look at them before. I don't think, since we've been doing propaganda, we've not played them, so get some more.
Well, maybe this will be the weekend.
It's a lovely accent anyway, so I look forward to hearing that.
Don't tempt fate now. People will be saying, don't tempt fate. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what changes we make. Is that you want to watch changes?
Yeah. It's a hard toss-up for Farke because I think we've said this feels now like his preferred lineup very much, doesn't it? Like his strongest lineup. But he, like every coach, understands that there does have to be a certain degree of rotation. So it becomes difficult knowing who to take out, who to put in, how to make sure that you don't, like you said, baby with the bathwater, that you don't end up doing that. But it would, I mean, it might work if he goes unchanged at the weekend, but it would seem a little bit strange on the back of Sunderland not to think that the odd alteration here or there might be quite good. Do you give Nonto a game?
He has looked brighter, I think, off the bench.
I think he probably has.
But in favour of who?
Well, it's a very, very good question. Yeah. James, potentially. James wasn't great on Tuesday night, but has been really good. I mean, his numbers are really impressive. Do you shift Gray into midfield and give one of those two a break? Do you play Gruev? I mean, Gruev's hardly had much in the way of minutes, and Bundesliga player coming in. There are ways in which he can mix it up. He'll just know that if he does, it looks a little bit unfamiliar in comparison to what we're all used to. But that is why you have a squad. What
do you think then? What will they do? What will he do? Not just chucking ideas around. Commit to it, Mr. Hay.
I wonder if Nonto might start. I think it'll be the same back four, don't you? Mm-hmm. Because I'm not really sure what the alternative there is, unless he has Shackleton back and wants to mix that up. But I can't remember exactly what he said about Shackleton at the start of this week, but it wasn't sounding like he was very likely to be involved at the back end of it. So yeah, possibly Nonto in. I don't know if I can see him breaking up the Ampadu-Kamara combination, to be quite honest.
And do you wonder, maybe does he sit on? I mean, I know I advocate for making changes with one eye on the Ipswich game, but he might look at that and say, well, it's another full week away.
Yeah.
So do we use the same 11, give them a chance to remedy themselves, our strongest 11? It's tough, isn't it?
Put it this way, given the way that the selection's gone recently, it wouldn't be that much of a surprise if there wasn't much in the way of changes to the team at all. But it just felt like coming out of Sunderland, like everybody had a bit of a flat night. And if it was a one-off and you can refresh for the weekend, great. I think if you pick the same team and it looks leggy again on Saturday, you'll be wishing that you hadn't.
All right, and we'll get back together on Monday and have a chat about that as we head in towards Christmas. Sure, we'll take a break over Christmas. We might squeeze one in between the Boxing Day game and the 29th.
Yeah, for real.
But if we feel a desperate birdie need to get out of the house. Any of us are just going to sit at home feeding ourselves.
I'm going to say we're doing one, even if we're not. Just come in.
just go and sit in the woods.
Yeah, maybe we could come and sit in here. We don't have to record. It's warmer in here than it is in the woods. But yeah, no, absolutely. All right then, Phil. We'll enjoy the game hopefully on Saturday and get back to winning ways, and we will see you on the other side.
The Square Ball Podcast.